I'm Trish Thomas. I'm the membership chair for the Women's Council, and I just want to thank all of you. The excitement and engagement in this room has really helped to make our inaugural Wild Summit a huge success, and we're really thrilled that you're all here. I am very happy to introduce a dear friend, Wendy Booker, as our closing speaker. Wendy is on an amazing journey, and I've gotten to be on it with her for about the last 6 years. She is tackling marathons, mountains, and ice. She's doing it at the age of 58 with multiple sclerosis. And she was diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS in 1998. She'd never been an athlete, but she decided to run the Boston Marathon just to push back. And that's led her down a very interesting path. She's now run 10 marathons. She's climbed 6 of the 7 summits. She's attempted Everest twice. She's been to the North Pole, the South Pole, and she now lives in Clam Gulch, Alaska, and is training to race the Iditarod in 2015. She's a fantastic person. I know you're going to enjoy hearing a little bit of her story. I'm also happy to say her first book, New Altitude, was literally just released last week, and we have the first 100 printed copies ever out front. So if any of you want to grab one hot off the press, they'll be out there after she's finished. I just hope that each of you leaves the Wild Summit today with some ideas, some newfound knowledge, some inspiration, new connections, and that you're ready to pursue your own great adventure. So on that note, join me in welcoming Wendy Booker.
Wow. Wait a minute, make sure I'm mic'd. There we go. Can everybody hear me all right? Because I like to move around a lot. That's obvious by what I do, I guess. In 2005, I did an interview with Candy O'Terry of the Greater Boston Media, and it was a live radio interview. And I'll never forget, because she asked me the question, what is woman power? That's a really hard question to answer, especially in a live interview, and I'd been trained at that point to expect what we call fluff questions. That was the farthest thing from a fluff question I'd ever had. But I answered it. And I went back 2 years ago and did a follow-up interview with Candy. And I reminded her, and I said, you asked me the most profound question I'd ever been asked, and that is, what is woman power? And she again turned the tables on me, and she said, well, what would your answer now be? Darn it. I have to say, this is woman power. What I am seeing right here today, I'm supposed to be your motivational speaker. I think I've been more motivated by my entire afternoon with all of you and seeing woman power right here in the works. The leaders here of the business world, the CEOs of companies, the mentors, the girls who are going through the MBA program, I'm really honored to get to experience and live woman power all day today. And thanks for Wild for putting it on and putting it all together. So right away. Well, 26.2 miles, distance of a marathon, indeed became for me the distance of a lifetime. And I sincerely doubt, emphatically I know, I never would have taken on running the Boston Marathon had I not been diagnosed with MS. And I wanted to see just how hard and how far I could push back at that diagnosis, and that was the only reason I went into the training. I was not athletic. I really was thinking, this is going to be bad, and I better do something really outrageous before I end up in that wheelchair. And I remember going to my doctor in Boston and asking if this would be okay if I ran the marathon, and he said, are you a runner? And I said, no. And he said, maybe you should do something a little less extreme. And I'm thinking, why? What difference does it make? If I end up in a wheelchair from the marathon or the MS, the outcome's going to be the same. I might as well have a good time on my way to the wheelchair. Well, sort of a good time. So I ran this Boston Marathon. Because what I learned in those very early months of having an illness and facing a challenge is that any of us, when we face a challenge, our initial reaction is to lay on the couch, eat bonbons, and watch Oprah. Or now Ellen, or whatever, because we've lost Oprah. But anyway, that's all we want to do. And I thought, you know, you can do that, and it's okay to have that pity party initially, but you can't stay there. So I thought I needed to get up off that couch, and so running the Boston Marathon just because it was in my backyard seemed like the smart thing to do. And so that's what's launched me. But over the years, I've come to define myself by what I call my 3 S's. Self-discovery, serendipity, and a whole lot of stubbornness. And I thought, you know, if I'm going to use those words, I better look them up. And I went the old-fashioned way. I went to the dictionary, and I looked up stubbornness. It's not the nicest character quality. I really stopped at the first definition, which was obstinate. But I've come to realize, I think stubbornness is one of our best offense and defense. Stubbornness is beating our head against the wall. Stubbornness is retrying something, even though it doesn't work 5 times, maybe the 6th time it will work. It's what keeps me going out the door and recreating myself. So I don't think stubbornness is all that negative. I'm going to take it. Well, the next S is serendipity. Now, that was a little bit more difficult. Serendipity is a fortuitous accident. And I know for many people, especially those facing MS, to put multiple sclerosis and serendipity or a fortuitous accident into the same sentence isn't really what you're thinking. But serendipity is the good stuff that happens. Serendipity is when you have that open heart and mind and things come zinging in that you hadn't expected. And when you grab them, it's amazing what the outcome is. So serendipity, really, I'll take that one along with that stubbornness. The last S is self-discovery. And that's how we figure out who and what we are. No matter where our journey is, no matter what our challenge is, it's taking all those S's and putting it together and going on with our journey. And so those 3 S's are really what has come to define me over this last almost 15 years with my diagnosis. So now I can give you examples of exactly how these have worked in my life. And after I ran that very first marathon, I was invited to speak at the American Neurological Convention, 1,800 doctors. And after I was done speaking, I was invited out to dinner to a very fancy restaurant, sat at a big round table, similar to the one you're sitting at. And all the top brass in the MS world were there. The top research scientists, doctors, pharmaceutical companies, Fleischmann Hillard, the PR company. It was a who's who. And Alan Osmond, Donny Osmond's brother. Now, I fixed... we had a little problem. I fixated on Alan Osmond. All these doctors are talking about mice models and T1 cells and blood-brain barriers, and I kept saying, how many kids do you have? And how do you guys do Christmas? Now, I'm sure these doctors are thinking, who invited the ditz? But I missed all that. Well, the conversation finally ended all the medical jargon, and it came around to mountain climbing. Now, this is very spoiled on a Colorado audience, but I'm from New England. I'm from Boston. Anyway, the conversation came around to mountain climbing. And somebody at the table asked me if I'd ever climbed, and I proudly named off 2 mountains in New Hampshire that I now know to be foothills. Absolutely, I've climbed. The woman to my left, who was with Fleischmann Hillard, said we had an opportunity come up. There's a gentleman from Boulder, Colorado, who has MS, and he's looking to put the first team of climbers with MS, unguided, on Denali. Now, Denali, doesn't that sound hot and tropical? Pina coladas. I'm thinking the Hawaiian Islands. There was a certain amount of arrogance. I had just run the Boston Marathon. How hard can a mountain named Denali be? I said, I'm your woman. Now, the dinner ended. Didn't hear much more about it. And weeks went by, and I have to admit, if Google had been what it is today, and it wasn't quite up to what it is, and I'd gone home and Googled it, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you. I would have found out 2 things, that it's a car and a mountain. But I didn't have that opportunity. So weeks went by, and I finally called that woman back, and I said to her, that mountain you mentioned, where is it? Alaska. Damn! I'm thinking it's going to be cold. I said, well, that's funny. The only mountain I've ever heard of is McKinley. Same mountain. I said, oh, wait a minute. You know those 2 I told you about? I think I was 10. And I don't even think I got to the top. You're talking, this is you got the wrong woman. She said, well, hold on. If you're interested, we'll train you. Now, as quickly as I made that decision, I now knew this was going to take a lot more thought and a lot more responsibility. I do have children. And I said, I need time. They said, you have time? We'll give you 6 months. And during that 6 months, I got my hands on anything and everything I could read about McKinley and Denali. And I have to laugh because the very first book I got was aptly titled Surviving Denali. And the book is broken down into chapters according to the death and mayhem on the mountain. Cerebral edema, pulmonary edema, crevasse falls, frostbite. It makes my nose run just thinking about it. I read it. Oh, and what's really interesting is at the end of every chapter there's a chart. And the chart lists the climber's name, what country he came from, what happened to him, where it happened to him, and how much it cost the federal government to remove his body from the mountain. And I took jazzercise. So I still couldn't make up my mind whether I should get involved. And there is one word I missed in this whole thing, and maybe you have picked it up, unguided. that meant nothing to me. It still, until many months later, it still kept meaning nothing. Well, anyway, the months went by, and I finally decided that the only way I could make up my mind as to whether I was going to get involved or not, I held the answer within. And when I finally settled down long enough to write up one of those famous pro and con lists, and there were probably 30 reasons not to get involved, and death was very close to the top. But there were 3 reasons I had to do it. And at first it was personally compelling, because never in my life was I going to be given this opportunity and to have somebody else pay for it. So I knew that was really, I was interested and I was curious. And the second was even more important. This climb was not set up as a fundraiser, but had a twofold reason. It was set up to encourage the newly diagnosed to get on one of these therapies that were really changing the course of MS. And second, to show the world what people with MS were capable of. And so with those 3 in mind, I became a sole woman climber on a team called MS Don Denali 2002. Now, we like to say that weather prevented our summit, but that's always a catch-all phrase. It was that unguided piece that prevented the summit, but we won't talk about that. We certainly did change the perception, and that's where my stubbornness really started to kick in, because I started to look at Denali as more than a mountain. It really came to represent to me what life with MS or any challenge is like. We can't always get to the top. We have to try a little harder, take a little longer, and dig a little deeper. And so that's really what catapulted me to keep on going. So that's my stubborn piece. Now the serendipity, or that's really the serendipity piece, I guess I should say it that way, because that came so zinging out of nowhere. The serendipity part, or the next part, it came when I ran a second Boston Marathon. And it was a really difficult year that year. I decided to try it again because I couldn't remember finishing and crossing that finish line. So I thought maybe I had dreamt it. And I went into the training with an injury, and it was a horrible winter to train. But I did it anyway, and I decided this time I was going to get a coach because I had it in my mind that I was going to be able to get faster. Now, one thing I failed to tell you is that MS and speed will never go in the same sentence. But we don't like to think that, so we won't go there. But I decided to get a coach. I was going to take the sport on with a lot more responsibility, and I found a girl named Courtney, and she had done very well in the Philadelphia Marathon, and she was very intrigued by training this middle-aged woman with MS, and she started to train me. Well, she quickly found out that MS and speed were not going to go together, and instead of getting frustrated and giving up on me, Courtney started to teach me about mental toughness, both as it applies to sport, but more importantly, as it applies to life. And Courtney taught me that in our lifetime, we meet angels. Now, I'm not talking the glowy, fluffy kind like you see on television, but I'm talking about people that you meet who motivate you in ways you never expected. Now, the Boston Marathon route's loaded with angels, and there's little kids, and they have orange slices in their hand, and they're all sticky, and they want to touch you, and they want to high-five you. Or the Harley-Davidson guys, and they're all sticky, and they want to touch you. Or the Boston College student at mile 23 with a beer in his hand who says, "You look terrific." Even though at mile 23 you're anything but. Well, as I said, that was a really difficult year for me. I had 2 miles to go, and I was coming to the conclusion I wasn't going to finish. It is part of the sport. That's why they have ambulances and medical tents and buses to take you back. And I was going through this moral dilemma. Was I going to walk? Was I going to crawl? Was I going to throw up? At that point, any of all were possible. And I saw out of the corner of my eye what turned out to be my angel. And he was standing in the middle of the road, leaning against a pillar, looking really bored, like he wished us slower runners would hurry up and get done so he could go home. Well, I saw him, but like I said, I was suffering and not aware of anything. And I decided I was done, and I came to a stop. That policeman came over from where he was standing, put his finger in my face and said, "I didn't stand here all day to watch you stumble and fall. Now dig in." Fastest mile I ever ran. But dig in. How those 2 little words have come to set me on my path to what it means to have MS, what it means to have any challenge. Dig in. And as I said, we can't always get to the top, maybe not the first time. We have to take a little longer, try a little harder, and dig a little deeper, but we can do it. And finally comes the biggest stubborn piece of them all. I decided I was going to do the 7 summits, the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents. I was quickly able to knock off the goal and head off and did 6 of them with no problem, until I met the big kahuna, and that being Everest. I went off to try Everest in 2009. I got to 23,000 feet on the Lhotse face, and I had to turn back. I started to analyze why it didn't work and what went wrong and the team and all those other variables that go into it, and more thought that I had to learn more about the mountain. I spent another year training, and I returned in 2010. What a lot of people don't know is that you're on Everest for 2.5 months living above 17,000 feet. It's a very difficult life. It's probably one of the most unpleasant places I've been. And my first mistake was I shouldn't have gone so soon. I should have put more time between my first attempt and trying it again. But I went back anyway, and in 2010, at about a little higher than 23,000 feet, I started to notice that my lips were numb, and that my left hand was stiff, and that my left foot was turning in. And wouldn't you know, right on the side of Everest, on the Lhotse face, I have one of the biggest MS flare-ups I've ever had in my life. This wasn't unheard of. I mean, I can't say I didn't know this was a possibility. I knew I was pushing myself, the disease, and everything beyond the realm. I always anticipated this could happen. I carried special medicine just in case. I was able to get back to base camp under my own power, which was very important, because if I'd been helicoptered off, you all would have heard about it. And my mother still thinks I'm off doing a little hike, so it was really important that I did. I did get back. And I was able to get medical help and get off the mountain. And I came back to the United States, and the very first thing I did was lay on the couch, eat bonbons, and watch Oprah. I was done. I couldn't make my goal. How can I go around and speak and challenge people and educate, motivate, and challenge when I couldn't do it myself? How good would I be if I couldn't attain the goal that I had set? And I realized Everest is a lofty goal, but it was mine. And what was the one thing that stopped me? Was that one thing that propelled me, the multiple sclerosis. And so I went to that deep, dark place that we all go when we are told we can't do something or shouldn't do something or couldn't do something. And I laid on that couch for about 3 months, feeling pathetic and very, very sorry for myself. But then I started to think, what is Everest? It's the top of the world. But is it the only top? And so on April 23rd, 2011, I became the first person with multiple sclerosis to stand on the geographical North Pole. And it wasn't that I changed the goal. I just changed how I got there. I still was able to stand on top of the world. It just was through a different route. It was the biggest failure I'd ever had, and yet the biggest success I ever felt. To be able to say, I did achieve something. I have stood on the top of the world. And after the North Pole, I thought, you know, if I'm going to go to the top, I might as well go to the bottom. So I did the South Pole as well. And so I'm going back. What is woman power? When I answered that question in 2005, my answer was that woman power, I was born a child of the 50s, when everything was, you know, June Cleaver. The turbulent 60s started where women were starting to push and the feminist movement started and Gloria Steinem came out. I particularly, as an adult woman and wife and mother, found the late 70s and 80s the most difficult time for women. Those of us who chose to stay home and raise children were feeling very inferior to the women who were going out and having a career. Those having a career were feeling guilty because they weren't staying home with their kids. I now look back and say woman power are all the women who went before me, who have taken me to 2013, and the choices I have gotten to make because of those women. Woman power, how my answer has grown. It hasn't so much changed. Woman power are all the women sitting in here today. As I said in the beginning, you are woman power. You have made the choices. You have made the path clear for the girls coming up for the MBA program. Oh my God, think of what it's going to be like for them in 10 years. Woman power are the choices we have by the women who went before us and forged the way. Woman power are the women who aren't afraid to make a choice, aren't afraid to take the path less traveled, who put up with not making it to the top of Everest. That's woman power. And so I again want to end by saying, climb your own mountain. The view from the top is incredible. Thank you so much for having me today.
You all sit there. Boy, oh boy, what a day. After that, I don't think I've ever been as inspired or feel like such a slacker in my life. Oh my God, I have to go hiking now? And I don't hike. Well, I'm looking out here and I'm seeing smiles. I'm seeing happy people. Did you guys have a good day? It was a great day. You know, for an inaugural event, it wasn't all bad. I'm just in awe. In a couple of days, probably early next week, we're going to send an evaluation survey out to everybody. We really do value your feedback because we're going to do it again next year. So I think we got to do this again next year. We'll probably have to get a bigger venue. I don't know, just saying. But thank you for your faith in us, for coming and for participating the way that you did, for being open the way that you've been, and for embracing all of the ideas, all of the speakers, all of the things that we tried to bring to you could not have been possible without so many people working on this and without you people taking the time and trusting us to come today. So I guess, thank you. As Shelley said, don't forget to say thank you. I can't say thank you enough. But also, I think it's important now that we've had some time together. If you've got a few minutes, please stick around. Down the hall, there's going to be a couple of bars set up, and we'd love to have a cocktail. So in closing, let's go drink.